Today, Monday the 13th of July, is the second annual Chronic Illness Recovery Day. The aim is simple: to encourage people to celebrate progress, however small, and where appropriate, to celebrate recovery from chronic illnesses. So if you have ME, CFS, fibromyalgia, long COVID, POTS, functional neurological disorder, or FND, persistent pain, multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS, or another long-term chronic condition, I hope other people's stories and my story offers you some hope. I went off work in 1997 after my health had gradually deteriorated over 2 or 3 years whilst working in a stressful, demanding management role. The final straw came after what seemed like a relatively minor viral illness. I caught a chill while visiting a friend's house, developed flu-like symptoms, and I went off work. I assumed I'd be away for a few days, a week at most, but I didn't return to work for another 9 years. Initially, I was virtually bedbound, spending 18 hours plus each day sleeping and resting. At my worst, I couldn't walk for even 1 minute without severe payback. I won't list every symptom, but they included severe physical exhaustion, profound cognitive and brain fog, sleeping for 3 hours both in the morning and afternoons. When I woke up, I'd feel like I had a terrible hangover. I remained exhausted even after sleeping. I had sensitivity to sound to the point where sometimes I couldn't tolerate people talking to me. I had sensitivity to cold, which would trigger shivering and flu-like symptoms. Feeling completely exhausted simply from eating food. I would wake during the night hungry despite the fact that I was eating twice as much as I do now. I experienced overwhelming malaise, even when I became well enough to manage a gentle walk in the park. Going to bed often felt like relief because simply being awake was exhausting, and waking each morning just meant walking straight back into those symptoms. Like many people, I was determined to get better. Once I had the capacity, I did everything I could think of to support my recovery. I rested, I ate as healthily as I could. I practiced yoga and qigong, which is like Tai Chi, to keep my body strong. And I started doing that because the instructor who came to the ME group that I belonged to said it helped him from being wheelchair bound to being able to climb up mountains. He had a condition, he was a marathon runner, and he got some problems with his tendons and stuff, and an operation didn't go well. He ended up in the wheelchair, but he stopped using his wheelchair from, he says, using that approach. I have made videos where I talk about that approach called qigong, and I did find that when I was at my worst, just doing a 1 minute routine that I talk about in that video seemed to help strengthen my body, and I do that a few times a day when I was most exhausted. So I took supplements. I saw numerous practitioners, including naturopaths, herbalists, nutritionists, osteopaths, and others. Some things helped a bit. For example, taking supplements for leaky gut helped me be able to tolerate exercise more, but nothing got me back to full health. One thing I found very difficult at times was when people suggested that stress might be contributing to me staying unwell. I interpreted that as them saying the illness wasn't real. Looking back, I realised that these are two completely different issues. The illness was unquestionably real. And if you've got any of those conditions that I've mentioned, they are real. The question was whether stress was keeping my nervous system stuck and whether it was influencing what was keeping it going. At the time, I didn't understand what people meant by mind-body approaches, nor did I appreciate the potential importance of the nervous system in recovery. I thought the conversation was about whether my illness was real. It wasn't. As I've already said, the illness was real. The question was whether there were additional factors, including chronic stress, fear, learned patterns, nervous system dysregulation, that might be contributing to why my body was struggling to recover. Understanding that distinction became an important turning point for me. One of the biggest misunderstandings I still come across weekly is this. People point to research showing biological abnormalities in conditions such as ME, CFS, long COVID, and conclude that this proves that mind, body, or nervous system approaches cannot help because the physical is real. I don't believe that conclusion follows. As I said, the illness is unquestionably real and physical. But finding biological dysfunction doesn't necessarily tell us what is driving or maintaining that dysfunction. I don't think it's widely appreciated how chronic stress can influence our susceptibility to illness, slow healing, and influence how the nervous system and immune and endocrine systems function. That doesn't mean stress is the sole cause of chronic illness, or that everyone would benefit from mind-body approaches. However, if stress, fear, nervous system dysregulation are contributing factors for someone, addressing those may be an important part of their recovery. So it's up to you to decide whether that is the case. My only concern is if people ignore this piece of the jigsaw, they are ignoring something that could potentially help. That certainly proved to be true in my case and for many other people, including people I've worked with. If you're someone who rarely becomes stressed or anxious, doesn't worry about symptoms, and generally remains calm regardless of what's happening, then maybe this approach isn't relevant to you. But if you recognize yourself in any of the following patterns: boom and bust cycles, perfectionism, putting pressure on yourself, trying to push through symptoms, or constantly striving to return to your previous life, becoming stressed and fearful around symptoms, catastrophizing, constant worry or rumination, being very self-critical, feeling exhausted simply by thinking about doing an activity, living in a state of fear, tension or hypervigilance, then it may be worth exploring whether nervous system regulation could become one part of your recovery journey. As I began learning and applying these approaches alongside other things I was doing, things started to change. I began getting more of my life back. Eventually, I was able to return to work, travel again, go to music festivals, play tennis, swim, cycle, hike, rebuild my life, enjoy life again. Today, I have an unrelated injury that slowed me down a bit, but life is still amazing. In the mornings, I wake up looking forward to the day, enthusiastic about working and starting my day. So if you're still struggling with chronic illness, please don't assume that because something hasn't worked, nothing ever will. There are many different paths to improvement, and different people recover in different ways. For me, learning to understand and work with my nervous system became one of those missing pieces. It wasn't the only thing I did, but it turned out to be one of the most important for me. Recovery wasn't about pretending that symptoms weren't real. It was about becoming curious about everything that might be contributing to the maintenance of my condition and everything that might help move towards health. That included rest when appropriate, nutrition, gradually changing how I responded to stress and symptoms, listening to my body, processing my emotions, taking steps to get more connection, fun, stimulation, and meeting my needs, learning how to make my nervous system feel safer. None of that means I was at fault for getting sick or staying sick. It simply means I discovered there were factors that were within my influence and helped support my recovery. So whatever stage you are at today, I hope you'll take a moment to acknowledge how far you've come or the positive steps you're taking. Whether you're celebrating recovery, improvement, or simply getting through another challenging day, your efforts count. And if you're someone who's recovered or improved, I hope you'll consider sharing your story. For someone who is struggling today, it might be the encouragement they need to keep going. Dare to dream big dreams and take steps, no matter how small. Happy Chronic Illness Recovery Day.